The conference room on the 43rd floor of the Meridian Tower smells like leather and old money and something else. Something sharper. Underneath it all, like ozone before a lightning strike, like the particular anxiety of a room where someone is about to lose everything they were born to inherit. I am sitting in a chair that costs more than most people's monthly rent, across a table that stretches so long you need to raise your voice to be heard at the other end, and I am watching Raymond Hargrove smile at me. Not the smile you give someone you respect. Not the smile you offer across a negotiating table when you're about to make a fair compromise. This is the smile of a man who has already won, or believes he has, and who wants to make absolutely certain that you understand the full weight of your own defeat before he lets you leave the room. It is the smile of someone who has rehearsed this moment, someone who has been looking forward to it. He has a pen in his hand, the expensive kind, matte black with a gold band, and he taps it twice against the mahogany like a judge bringing down a gavel. Casual, rhythmic, deliberate. Your grandmother, he says, letting each word sit in the air long enough to be felt, signed the company away before she died. He pauses. He lets it land. The paperwork is airtight, Daniela. Every clause, every signature, every notarization. We had 3 separate legal teams review it. The smile widens by exactly 1 degree. The degree that tells you he is enjoying this. There's nothing for you here. The other board members are watching me the way you watch a car crash in slow motion, with that particular human mix of guilt and fascination. Some of them have the decency to look away. Raymond Hargrove does not look away. He watches me the way a cat watches a wounded bird with patient, professional satisfaction. I do not cry. I do not raise my voice. I look at him for a long moment, and then I pick up my copy of the document they've slid across the table, and I set it carefully into my bag. Okay, I say. That's all. Just, okay. And I watch something flicker behind his eyes. Confusion, maybe, or the first distant shadow of uncertainty before the smile returns, fully confident, a curtain snapping back into place. To understand how Raymond Hargrove lost $1 billion construction empire in the 60 seconds it took a forensic accountant to pull up a server log on a Tuesday morning, we have to go back 9 months. My name is Daniela Voss. My grandmother was Elara Voss. And Elara Voss built Voss Saw Infrastructure Group from a single surveying contract in 1974 into the largest private construction and land development company in the mid-Atlantic region. 47 years of steels and concrete and early mornings and handshake deals that she always followed up with signed paperwork, because she was not a woman who trusted sentiment over documentation. She taught me that. She taught me everything, actually. I spent summers in her field offices in hard hats that were 2 sizes too large, learning to read blueprints before I could properly read novels, learning to calculate load tolerances before I understood algebra. I was being groomed. Not in the vague aspirational way that rich families sometimes talk about legacy, in the specific, operational way of a woman who intended for her company to outlast her and who had chosen her successor with the same precision she applied to every contract she had ever signed. That successor was me. The will said so. The succession documents she filed in 2019 said so. The board resolution she passed in a formal session in March of the year before she got sick said so. Daniela Voss, her granddaughter and chosen heir, would assume the position of Chief Executive Officer of Voss Infrastructure Group upon Elara's death or voluntary retirement, with a 51% controlling stake transferring directly. Raymond Hargrove had been my grandmother's chief operations officer for 11 years. He was competent in the way that a tool is competent, precisely calibrated for a specific function, and profoundly uninterested in anything outside its range. He managed logistics, he managed vendor relationships. He played golf with city council members and remembered their children's names at Christmas parties. He did not, in 11 years, ever once disagree with my grandmother in a board meeting. He nodded, he implemented. He was useful. But in the 18 months before Elara Voss died of pancreatic cancer, 18 months during which she was sick and tired and in and out of treatment and sometimes not fully lucid, Raymond Hargrove became something different. He became patient. I noticed it in small ways. The way he started lingering after board meetings to have private conversations I wasn't invited to. The way certain documents began routing through his office before reaching mine. The way he started prefacing recommendations with phrases like, "Elara and I discussed this privately," in tones that were impossible to verify and impolitic to challenge. My grandmother, in her final 8 months, was not always entirely herself. She had good days and bad days. On her good days, she was still sharp, still the woman who could look at a balance sheet and identify a discrepancy in 45 seconds. On her bad days, she was somewhere else, somewhere warm and soft and very far from the company she had built. Raymond Hargrove was present for more of those days than I was. I was managing 3 active construction projects across 2 states. I was doing the job she had trained me to do. He was doing something else entirely. When she died in October, The grief was enormous and specific. The grief of losing not just a grandmother, but a teacher and an anchor, and the one person in every room who had, always, unconditionally, believed that I belonged there. I did not expect the call I received 4 days after the funeral. Raymond Hargrove's voice on the phone was smooth and careful and expressed condolences with the practiced warmth of a man who had rehearsed them. And then he told me that Elara had amended her succession documents, quietly, privately, in the last few months of her life, that she had, in consultation with the board, restructured the ownership arrangement, that the 51% controlling stake would not be transferring to me, that a revised NDA, signed, he said, by my grandmother herself, contained clauses that altered the succession structure and bound me to a non-disclosure agreement preventing me from contesting the arrangement publicly. Your grandmother made her wishes clear, he said. We're honoring them. I asked for copies of the documents. He said his legal team would be in touch. They were. 3 weeks later, a package arrived, thick, formal, bound with a blue legal ribbon, the NDA amendment, the succession restructuring, notarized, witnessed, bearing on every relevant page, the signature of Elara Voss, her signature, her handwriting. Except my grandmother had been in a medically induced sedation protocol during the week. Those documents were dated. I knew this because I had sat beside her hospital bed for 4 of those 7 days, and on the other 3 I had been in contact with her palliative care nurse twice daily. But I was not a lawyer. I was not a forensic examiner. I was a grieving granddaughter holding a stack of very convincing paperwork, being told by 3 separate legal teams that everything was in order. So I walked into that conference room on the 43rd floor. I sat down across from Raymond Hargrove and his gold-banded pen and his smile. I listened to him tell me my grandmother had signed the company away, and I said, okay, because I had already made one phone call, quiet, private, to a digital forensic accountant named Marcus Webb who specialized in exactly one thing: finding what documents were hiding inside the machines that created them. Raymond Hargrove thought he had already won. He had no idea the audit had already begun. The week after the conference room meeting, Raymond Hargrove moved fast. This is the thing about men who have spent years being cautious and strategic and quietly patient. When they finally believe the coast is clear, when they finally believe the last obstacle has been removed, they move with an urgency that borders on recklessness. The mask of patience drops. Underneath it is appetite, naked and uncomplicated. He convened a special board session within 72 hours of our meeting. He restructured the executive suite. He had his name placed on the company letterhead as chairman and interim CEO of Voss Infrastructure Group. My grandmother's name, which had been on that letterhead since 1974, moved to a smaller typeface in the corner, listed under founder, past tense, archived, made historical. I learned about this from Priya Menon, who had been my grandmother's executive assistant for 14 years, and who called me from her car in the parking garage because she did not trust the office phones anymore. Her voice was low and tight, and she gave me the information in short, clipped sentences, the way you report a disaster while standing in the rubble of it. He's restructuring everything, she told me. He called a vendor meeting for next Tuesday and told them there would be a new direction for the company's procurement strategy. Daniela, she paused. He's already redirecting contracts, I thanked her. I told her to document everything she could without putting herself at risk. I told her to be careful. I did not tell her what I had already set in motion. It was better that way. Raymond Hargrove also, in those first weeks, made a point of being visible. He appeared at an industry gala in the city, photographed shaking hands with the Deputy Secretary of Transportation, smiling the smile. He gave a brief interview to a trade publication about his vision for Voss Infrastructure's next chapter, a phrase he used twice, once while looking directly at the camera. He sent me, through his legal team, a formal letter confirming the terms of the arrangement, reiterating the NDA clause, and offering me a face-saving exit, a consulting arrangement, nominal, token, the kind of thing you offer someone to make the paperwork look clean. The letter was 3 pages long. It was written on Voss Infrastructure letterhead. It was signed by Raymond Hargrove in the same matte black pen with the gold band. I read it once, folded it carefully back into its envelope, and added it to the file I was building. Because here is the thing that Raymond Hargrove understood about power. It is largely a matter of paperwork. Whoever controls the documents controls the narrative. He had spent 11 years watching my grandmother demonstrate this truth, and he had learned the lesson well enough to weaponize it. What he did not understand, what men like him rarely understand, in my experience, is that paperwork leaves ghosts. Every document that has ever been created digitally exists in multiple places simultaneously. It exists in the file where you saved it. It exists in the auto-recovery cache. It exists in the metadata embedded in the document itself, the created date, the modified date, the author field, the revision history. It exists in the email system that transmitted it, in the server logs that recorded that transmission, in the backup archives that capture the server state at regular intervals, creating a kind of digital sediment, layer upon layer upon layer of recorded time. Raymond Hargrove had created convincing documents. He had attended to the visible surface of those documents with enormous care. He had not attended to the sediment. Marcus Webb called me on a Thursday evening, 11 days after I had retained him. He had been given a narrow, specific mandate. He could not access Voss Infrastructure's live systems without authorization. I did not have the legal standing to grant. But he could work with what was publicly accessible: SEC filings, publicly recorded deeds, the notarized documents that had been submitted to the county probate court as part of the estate process, all of which were public record. And he had found something. The notarization date on the NDA amendment, he said without preamble, is October 3rd. Yes, I said. I had the document in front of me. The notary stamp used is registered to a firm called Caldwell & Associates. They filed their quarterly notarization log with the state licensing board on October 15th. He paused. October 3rd is not in the log. Silence. They missed it, I asked. Or it wasn't notarized on October 3rd, he said. The notary stamp can be applied to a document at any time. The licensing log is the only external timestamp that doesn't exist inside a system Hargrove's team controls. It was small. It was the width of a single administrative oversight, a notary log entry that should have existed and did not. It was the kind of discrepancy that would mean nothing on its own, that would be easily explained away by a clever attorney as a clerical error, a filing delay, an administrative backlog. But Marcus Webb's voice had a particular quality to it, the quality of a man who has found the first thread of a sweater and already knows, from the texture of it, that the entire garment is going to unravel. "That's not the main thing," he said. "Tell me," I said. The document was created in Microsoft Word, the metadata in the publicly filed PDF, and they filed it as a PDF through the probate court's electronic filings system, which means the metadata traveled with it. Shows the original Word document was created on a workstation. Registered to Voss Infrastructure Group. I said nothing. Created date, September 29th. Author field, R. Hargrove. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. Your grandmother died on October 7th. The document is dated and was supposedly signed and witnessed on October 3rd. But the file was created 4 days before that, on September 29th, on a workstation registered to Raymond Hargrove in his name. Raymond Hargrove thought he had been meticulous. He thought he had thought of everything. He had not thought about the author field. He had not thought about the created date stamp embedded in a Word document that would travel intact and unaltered through every conversion and filing and system that touched it. He had not thought about what the server backup archives would show if someone with the right authorization were ever to pull them. And there was the question, the one that would define everything that came next, of who exactly might have that authorization. I thought about Priya Menon, who had been my grandmother's executive assistant for 14 years, who had system administrator credentials that had never been revoked, because Raymond Hargrove, in his rush to restructure everything visible, had not thought to audit the access permissions of a woman he considered furniture, who had been documenting everything she could without putting herself at risk, who had, 3 days ago at my quiet suggestion, submitted a formal internal compliance request, which, under Voss Infrastructure's own corporate bylaws, required the company to preserve all server backup archives for a minimum of 90 days pending review. The archives were locked. Raymond Hargrove didn't know it yet. He was at a gala somewhere, being photographed, smiling the smile, convinced the story was already over. There is a particular quality to the silence of investigative work that most people never encounter. Not the silence of waiting, which is passive, or the silence of grief, which is consuming, but the silence of methodical, deliberate pursuit. It has a texture to it, a weight. You sit in it for hours at a time, moving through documents and timestamps and metadata the way a surgeon moves through tissue. Carefully, precisely, with the understanding that what you are looking for is both very small and very consequential, and that impatience is the only thing that can make you miss it. I spent 6 weeks in that silence. Marcus Webb worked on the forensic side. I worked on the legal and historical side. We spoke every Tuesday and Thursday, always by phone, always brief, always specific. He reported what he found. I cross-referenced it against the documentary history I was building, the paper trail of the company that stretched back 47 years, which I had better access to than anyone alive, because I had spent 20 years learning it at my grandmother's side. Let me tell you what we found. The first layer of the investigation was the notary discrepancy Marcus had identified in that first phone call. We documented it carefully. The state licensing board's publicly accessible notarization log, the date gap, the specific registration number of the Caldwell & Associates stamp. It was a thread. It was not, on its own, enough. The second layer was the metadata from the probate filing. Marcus extracted it in full and had it independently verified by a second forensic examiner, a woman named Dr. Therese Okafor, who held a faculty position at a university law school and provided expert witness services to courts across 3 states. She confirmed his findings. The Word document that became the NDA amendment had been created on September 29th on a workstation assigned to Raymond Hargrove, 4 days before the date stamped on the notarized document. "This doesn't prove forgery," she told me, carefully in the measured language of a professional who has testified in court and knows exactly where the lines are. "What it proves is that the document metadata is inconsistent with the stated timeline. It raises legitimate questions that would warrant further investigation in a formal proceeding." "Is it enough to compel discovery?" I asked. "With the right attorney," she said, "and the right judge, yes, it is enough to compel discovery." The right attorney turned out to be a woman named Celeste Abrams, a corporate litigation specialist who had spent 22 years handling exactly this kind of case: estate fraud, document manipulation, corporate succession disputes, and who had a reputation for a particular kind of cold, forensic ferocity in depositions that made opposing counsel request continuances simply to collect themselves. She reviewed everything Marcus and Dr. Okafor had produced. She was quiet for a long time after reading it. "The metadata is the foundation," she said finally. "But what we need is the server backup archives. If Hargrove's team created this document on a Voss infrastructure workstation, that creation event will appear in the backup logs. The backup system records every file creation, every modification, every access event with a timestamp that is generated by the server itself, not by the document, not by the user, not by anything that Hargrove could have manually adjusted without access to the server's root system." "And he doesn't have that access?" I asked. Celeste looked at me with the expression of a woman who has learned to be precise about exactly this kind of question. "He has executive access, the kind that lets you manage files, create documents, set permissions. He does not have root-level server access. That's administered by the company's IT infrastructure provider, a third-party firm called Nexus Systems, which holds the server maintenance contract." She paused. "Nexus Systems," she continued, "is bound by their service contract with Voss Infrastructure to maintain backup archive integrity. They are also, under federal regulations governing corporate data preservation, required to comply with a properly issued legal hold notice." She looked at me. "Priya Menon's internal compliance request has already established a hold on the archives within the company's own system. What we need next is a subpoena compelling Nexus Systems to produce their backup logs directly, bypassing whatever access Hargrove's team has to the internal system." "Can you get that?" I asked. "I can file for it," she said, "but I need to establish standing first." "You are not currently a party to any formal legal proceeding involving Voss Infrastructure, which means I cannot file a discovery subpoena on your behalf without initiating one." She looked at the documents on her desk. "The good news is that we have more than enough to file a civil action contesting the validity of the NDA amendment and the succession restructuring." "File it," I said. She filed it on a Monday morning, 12 days later. It named Raymond Hargrove personally and Voss Infrastructure Group as defendants. It alleged document fraud in connection with a succession dispute, sought invalidation of the NDA amendment and the succession restructuring, and attached, as exhibits, the metadata analysis prepared by Marcus Webb and the expert certification prepared by Dr. Therese Okafor. The news reached Raymond Hargrove at approximately 11 a.m. that Monday. I know this because Priya Menon, who was sitting in the outer office of the executive suite when his legal team's call came through, told me that she could hear his voice through the closed door, and that the particular quality of that voice, for approximately 45 seconds after the call connected, was unlike anything she had heard in 14 years of working in that building. But we were not done. We were not close to done. Because while Celeste was building the legal case and Marcus was preparing his expert report, I had been doing something else, something slower and more painstaking and more personal than any of the technical forensics. I had been going through my grandmother's records, not the company records, her personal records, the ones she kept at the house, the ones that had passed to me as personal property when she died, boxes of them, organized with the same precision she brought to everything, labeled by year, by category, by project, and in the box labeled legal, personal in a manila folder dated March of the year before she got sick, I found a document I had not known existed. It was a letter, handwritten. In my grandmother's handwriting, same handwriting that appeared on the signatures Raymond Hargrove had forged, which meant I could compare them directly. The letter was addressed to her personal attorney, a man named Gerald Finch who had retired from practice 18 months before her death. The letter is instructed Gerald Finch to maintain In his private files, a complete copy of every succession document, every board resolution, and every ownership transfer record pertaining to Voss Infrastructure Group, complete, unaltered, held outside the company's own filing system. Because, the letter said, she had concerns. She had not named those concerns explicitly. She had not named Raymond Hargrove, but she had written, in her careful, angular handwriting, that she wanted documentation to exist outside of any system over which the company's current operational leadership had influence. She had written that she trusted Gerald Finch to maintain this record with discretion. She had written that she hoped it would never be needed. Gerald Finch was retired. He was 74 years old. He lived in Charlottesville and spent his days gardening and reading history. He returned my call within 2 hours and told me, in a voice that was steady and deliberate and carried the weight of a man who had been waiting for exactly this phone call, that yes, he had the files, that yes, they were complete, that yes, he would cooperate fully with whatever legal proceedings were necessary. My grandmother had known. She had known or feared or suspected, and she had built a backup into the backup, hidden in the private files of a retired attorney in Charlottesville, a failsafe that existed entirely outside the digital systems that Raymond Hargrove believed he controlled. Marcus Webb, when I told him about Gerald Finch's files, was quiet for a long moment. The succession documents in Finch's files will have their own metadata, he said. If they're digital copies, scanned, emailed, anything electronic, they'll carry timestamps from when they were created, before your grandmother got sick, before Hargrove had any opportunity to tamper with anything. And when we compare them to the versions Hargrove's submitted to probate court? I asked. Then we have a before and an after, Marcus said. We have what the documents looked like before he touched them, and we have what they looked like after. I thought about Raymond Hargrove at his gala, being photographed, smiling. I thought about a document sitting in a retired attorney's filing cabinet in Charlottesville, patient, intact, untouched, waiting. The snare was nearly ready. There is a discipline required in the final phase of any long investigation, a discipline that is almost counterintuitive. Because by this stage you have assembled enough to feel the weight of what you are holding, enough to understand the shape of the complete picture, and every instinct says, move, deliver it, end this now. The discipline is to wait, to be certain, to build the structure so carefully, so comprehensively, so airtightly that when you finally deliver it, there is no gap through which a clever attorney can pull anything to safety. Celeste Abrams had this discipline in abundance. She had built cases for 22 years, and she had a phrase she used when I grew impatient, which was, we don't wound it, we end it. The 4 weeks between the filing of the civil action and the formal discovery hearing were the most carefully orchestrated 4 weeks of my life. The subpoena to Nexus Systems was filed 5 days after the civil action. Celeste had prepared it with surgical specificity, not a broad request for server records, which opposing counsel could have contested as overreaching, but a precise, narrow request for the backup archive logs covering a specific 45-day window, specifically related to 3 document identifiers that Marcus had extracted from the probate filings metadata. Hargrove's legal team contested the subpoena. Of course they did. They filed a motion arguing that the request was disproportionate to the needs of the case, that it would expose proprietary corporate information, that compliance would be operationally burdensome for Nexus Systems. The judge considered this argument for approximately 6 minutes before denying the motion. Nexus Systems complied within the mandatory 72-hour window. They produced a data package, compressed, encrypted, transferred through a secure court-administered portal that contained the server backup logs for the requested window. Marcus Webb received access to the data package on a Wednesday afternoon. He called me at 9:47 that evening. His voice had a quality I had not heard in it before. Not excitement, exactly, but a kind of controlled gravity. The voice of a man who has found exactly what he was looking for and understands precisely what it means. The backup logs show 3 distinct events, he said. Event 1, September 29th, 11:23 a.m. A new document is created on workstation 4. That's Hargrove's primary office workstation. Confirmed by the machine's network registration. The file is named internally NDA Amendment Draft V1. I wrote that down. Time, date, workstation. File name 2, October 1st, 2:17 p.m. The same document is modified. New file name NDA Amendment Final. Same workstation. A second user credential appears in the log for a 5-minute window during this modification. A credential associated with the company's external legal contractor, meaning someone outside the company was involved in the modification, I said. Meaning someone with an external contractor credential logged into the system and interacted with that file during the modification window. Marcus said carefully, what they did during that window is in the log. They accessed the document's signature fields. There was a long silence. Event 3, he continued. October 3rd, 9:44 a.m. The document is accessed from a different workstation, workstation 22, which is registered to the company's records management administrator. The document is exported as a PDF. That PDF is then sent via the company's email server to an external address. He paused. The export timestamp is 9:44 a.m. The notarization, if it had actually occurred on October 3rd as the document claims, would have had to precede the export, because you cannot notarize a digital document that hasn't been finalized yet. But the backup log shows no access to the document between October 1st and October 3rd. The finalized PDF was exported on the 3rd, but it was last modified on the 1st, and a notary was supposedly present on the 3rd, I said. The Caldwell & Associates log shows no record of a notarization of any Voss infrastructure document in September or October, Marcus said. We knew that already, but now we also know that between October 1st and October 3rd, the window in which the notarization supposedly occurred, no one accessed that document on any Voss infrastructure workstation. I sat with that for a moment. The notarization stamp was applied to a document that had already been finalized and that no authorized user accessed during the window in which the notarization supposedly occurred, I said. Which means the stamp was applied after the fact, Marcus said, or off-system, or both. Gerald Finch's files arrived from Charlottesville by secure courier 4 days later. The originals, not copies. In the same manila folders my grandmother had packed them into, each document pristine. Each one dated in a period before the company's leadership had changed, each one bearing Gerald Finch's own notarization records in his private log, which he had maintained with the meticulous precision of a man who had spent 40 years making sure his paperwork was unimpeachable. Dr. Okafor examined the documents. She compared them systematically to the version submitted to probate court. She produced a 47-page expert report. Her findings, the succession documents in Gerald Finch's files, and the version submitted to probate court were not the same documents. Specific clauses had been altered. The NDA amendment's critical succession restructuring language did not appear in the Finch versions at all, because it had not existed when those versions were created. It had been inserted later. Celeste read the report, set it on her desk, and looked at me across the table with the expression of a woman who has spent 22 years litigating fraud cases and knows, with professional certainty, when the answer is complete. We're going to the district attorney, she said. This had not been the original plan. The original plan was civil litigation, invalidation of the fraudulent documents, restoration of my succession rights, recovery of any financial damage incurred during Hargrove's tenure as a legal CEO. Clean, administrative, financial. The evidence supports criminal referral, Celeste said. Document fraud in the context of an estate proceeding is a felony. The server logs establish intentionality. This was not a mistake, not a clerical error, not an ambiguous interpretation of a document. This was a planned, deliberate falsification of estate documents, coordinated with an external actor, designed to defraud a legitimate heir of her inheritance. She looked at me. If we go to the DA, we lose some control over the timeline and the proceedings. But we also open the possibility of criminal charges against Hargrove personally. And the company? I asked. Civil action continues in parallel, she said. We don't drop anything, we add. I thought about Raymond Hargrove and his pen and his smile, and the way he had watched me leave that conference room. I thought about my grandmother, somewhere in the last weeks of her life, writing a letter in her angular handwriting to a retired attorney in Charlottesville because she had concerns she could not yet name. Add, I said. The referral to the district attorney's office was made on a Thursday. The DA assigned a financial crimes investigator within 48 hours. That investigator, armed with a warrant rather than a civil subpoena, served Nexus Systems with a demand for the complete backup archive, not the 45-day window Marcus had requested, but the full archive going back 3 years. They also served Caldwell & Associates. They also served the external legal contractor whose credentials had appeared in the server logs during the document modification window on October 1's. St. Raymond Hargrove was informed of the criminal investigation by his legal team on a Friday afternoon. I know the approximate time because Priya Menon, who was still employed by the company and still sitting in the outer office of the executive suite, called me that evening. She did not describe what she heard through the closed door. She simply told me that it had been, in her words, a different kind of sound. The deposition was scheduled for 14 days later. The deposition room is on the 7th floor of a building 4 blocks from the courthouse, in a law firm that has been handling civil and criminal proceedings in this city for 60 years. The carpet is gray. The walls are pale. The table is not mahogany. It is functional, laminate, anonymous, the kind of table that exists in a room whose only purpose is the formal extraction of truth. Raymond Hargrove arrives 11 minutes late. I notice this because I arrive 20 minminutes early and I sit at my side of the table and I wait. He looks different from the man in the conference room on the 43rd floor 9 months ago. The suit is the same quality. He is still technically the chairman and CEO of Voss Infrastructure Group, a position he has held for approximately 7 months and which he will not hold for much longer. But the suit fits differently. The way clothes fit differently on a man who has stopped sleeping properly. The fabric's somehow both too large and too tight at the same time. He doesn't look at me when he enters. He looks at his attorney, a senior partner from one of the city's largest firms, a man with silver hair and a carefully constructed expression of professional neutrality. His attorney looks at Celeste Abrams, who looks back with the specific quality of stillness she has in formal proceedings, the quality of a woman who is about to begin. The financial crimes investigator from the district attorney's office is also present. His name is Detective Marcus something, not my Marcus Webb. A coincidence of first names that strikes me briefly as appropriate, and he sits to the side with a tablet and a legal pad and the patient. Practiced attention of a man who has done this many times. Raymond Hargrove takes his seat. He picks up a glass of water. He sets it down without drinking. Celeste opens the deposition with procedural matters. She is unhurried. She establishes the date, the time, the parties present, the recording arrangements. She does this with the same unhurried precision with which a surgeon drapes the operating field. Methodically, completely, without rushing toward the part that matters. Hargrove's attorney has already reviewed the evidence package. He knows approximately what is coming. But knowing a thing is coming and experiencing it in a formal proceeding are two different things. And there is a particular quality to the next 90 minutes that no amount of preparation can fully insulate you from. Celeste begins with the documents. She places them on the table one at a time. The NDA amendment as submitted to probate court, the matching document from Gerald Finch's files, the forensic comparison prepared by Dr. Okafor. She's asked Hargrove to confirm that the probate document bears his signature on the authorization page. He confirms this on the advice of his counsel because denying it would be perjury and they both know it. She asks him to explain the discrepancies identified in Dr. Okafor's comparison report. His attorney objects to the form of the question. Celeste rephrases. She does this 3 times, each rephrasing slightly more precise, slightly more cornering. On the 4th version, his attorney lets him answer. Hargrove's answer is that the documents were prepared by the company's legal team, and that he signed what was presented to him, and that he cannot speak to any discrepancies in clause language as he relies on his counsel to advise him on legal language. Celeste nods. She makes a note. She moves to the metadata. She places Marcus Webb's expert report on the table. She walks through it with the careful, methodical clarity of someone who has spent significant time making sure that everything in this report is comprehensible to a general audience, too. A judge to a jury, if it comes to that. She explains what metadata is. She explains what a created date stamp is. She explains what an author field is. She explains each of these things not because she needs to, but because she wants the record to be complete, to be unambiguous, to be the kind of record that a jury can follow without difficulty. She then places the server backup logs from Nexus Systems on the table, not the civil subpoena results, the criminal warrant results. The complete archive, marked, tabbed, indexed. Mr. Hargrove, she says, I'd like to direct your attention to page 44 of the Nexus Systems archive production. This is a backup log entry for September 29th of last year. Can you read the entry in the highlighted section? He reads it. He reads it in a voice that has undergone a fundamental change from the voice that said, the paperwork is airtight, 9 months ago. That voice was warm with victory. This one is flat, careful, performing composure. He reads, a new document created, workstation 14, 11:23 a.m. Author R. Hargrove, file name NDA Amendment Draft V1. Is Workstation 14 your primary office workstation? Celeste asks. His attorney. Objection. Calls for a conclusion about. Celeste. The Nexus Systems Network registration, which is also in the production, lists Workstation 14 as assigned to Raymond Hargrove, Chairman's Office, Voss Infrastructure Group. Mr. Hargrove, is that your workstation? A pause. The kind of pause that has a texture to it, the kind that fills a room. That is my workstation, he says. So on September 29th, Celeste continues, a document called NDA Amendment Draft V1 was created on your workstation under your user credentials by your workstation's registered user. Is that what this log entry shows? That's what the log shows, he says. The NDA amendment submitted to probate court is dated October 3rd. Celeste says. She doesn't say it with drama. She says it the way you note a fact. It was supposedly signed and witnessed and notarized on October 3rd. But the document was created 4 days earlier, on your workstation. In your name. His attorney says something. Celeste waits for him to finish. I'd like to now direct your attention to page 61, she says. She does not raise her voice. This is the log entry for October 1st, a credential associated with an external contractor, an individual I will refer to as Individual A, whose name is contained in Sealed Exhibit 7 for purposes of the criminal proceeding. Accessed your document during this window and interacted with the signature fields. Hargrove's attorney leans in and speaks to him quietly. Hargrove listens. He nods. On the advice of counsel, he says, "I decline to answer questions related to Individual A," noted, Celeste says. She may take some mark on her legal pad. She is not deterred. She was not going to learn anything new from this answer. What she needed was the invocation, and she has it. "I'd like to now discuss the Caldwell & Associates notarization log," she says. This is where Raymond Hargrove's attorney earns his billing rate. He objects extensively, creatively, and without significant success. The log is a public record. The discrepancy is documented. The questions are permissible. Celeste asks Hargrove whether he is aware that the State Licensing Board's notarization log for Caldwell & Associates contains no record of a notarization of any Voss infrastructure document in September or October of last year. He says he is not aware of the contents of third-party administrative logs. She asks whether he can explain how a document could bear a valid notarization stamp from a firm that has no record of performing that notarization. His attorney objects. She rephrases. She asks this question in 7 different forms over the course of 11 minutes. Hargrove deflects, declines, circles, retreats. His attorney objects after each rephrasing. The record shows all of it, every deflection, every invocation, every retreat. Then Celeste does the thing she has been building toward for 2 hours. She reaches into the folder at her left hand and she removes a document, a single page, and she sets it on the table between them. It is my grandmother's letter. The handwritten letter to Gerald Finch, dated March, from the year before she got sick. The one in which she wrote that she had concerns. The one in which she instructed her personal attorney to maintain records outside the company's systems. This letter, Celeste says, was written by Elara Voss. The handwriting has been authenticated by a forensic document examiner, whose report is in evidence as Exhibit 22. It was written approximately 26 months before her death. It was maintained by Gerald Finch in his personal archive, outside of any Voss infrastructure system, and was produced to this proceeding in its original, unaltered form. She gives Hargrove time to read it. She gives him that time on purpose. She wants him to see it. She wants him to sit with it. "Mr. Hargrove," she says, when she judges he has read it, Elara Voss wrote, 26 months before she died, that she wanted documentation to exist outside of any system over which the company's current operational leadership had influence. She pauses. "Did Elara Voss have concerns about you specifically?" His attorney. Objection. Calls for speculation. "Did Elara Voss ever communicate to you, directly or indirectly, any concerns about your conduct in relation to the company's succession planning?" A long silence. The kind of silence that has weight, that presses down on the table and the gray walls and the functional laminate and the glass of water that Raymond Hargrove still has not touched. "No," he says. "She wrote this letter to her personal attorney in March," Celeste says. "She maintained a separate archive outside company systems. She specifically referenced concerns about operational leadership, and yet she never communicated any concerns to you." Celeste looks at him for a long moment. The same kind of moment I realized that he gave me in the conference room 9 months ago. The moment of full comprehension, of understanding the full weight of where you are. Then she closes her folder. "No further questions," she says. Raymond Hargrove's board voted to remove him from his position as chairman and CEO 17 days after the deposition. The vote was 6-1, and the one was a board member who reversed his position 4 hours later when Celeste filed the motion to add him as a co-respondent. The district attorney's office filed criminal charges, document fraud, estate fraud, conspiracy. 8 days after that, Individual A, the external contractor whose credentials had appeared in the server logs, entered into a cooperation agreement with prosecutors within 72 hours of being charged. The civil action was resolved in a settlement conference 6 weeks later. I will not describe the terms in detail, because the settlement is under a confidentiality agreement, an agreement I negotiated, this time, with an attorney of my own on my own terms, with full knowledge of what it contained before I signed it. What I will tell you is that when I walked into the Voss Infrastructure Group building, on the morning of the transition, the morning when the new letterhead went up, when the executive suite changed occupants, when the founder's name moved from the corner back to the center where it belonged, I walked in past the security desk and the elevator, bank, and the lobby photograph of my grandmother standing in a hard hat in front of a building she had just finished, and I stopped for a moment in front of that photograph. She is smiling in it. Not the performance of a smile, not the kind you deploy as a weapon, but the real thing, the unguarded, specific happiness of a person looking at something she built. I had her letter framed eventually. The one she wrote to Gerald Finch. I keep it in my office, not on display, not on the wall, but in my desk drawer, where I can take it out and read it when I need to remember that my grandmother, in the middle of her own fear and uncertainty, had the foresight to build a failsafe, had the wisdom to know that the truth, if you give it a safe place to wait, will keep. Raymond Hargrove's sentencing is scheduled for next spring. He has sold the penthouse. He has sold the gold-banded pen, presumably, among other things. I don't keep track. I have a company to run. There are blueprints on my desk. 3 active projects in 2 states. A vendor meeting on Tuesday. A board resolution to review, carefully, thoroughly, as many times as necessary. My grandmother taught me, never trust sentiment over documentation. But she also taught me, by example, that the right document, signed, dated, preserved, given to the right person to hold, can outlast almost anything, even the arrogance of a man who believed he had already won.